We now know the details of what Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrand had been doing to Ruby's two youngest children. Trigger warning right now, guys, because this is way worse than I thought. As you know, Ruby Franke was in court today. She pled guilty to 4 out of the 6 child abuse charges, and she has agreed to testify against Jodi Hildebrand. From her statement released by her lawyer this week, it sounds like she is putting a lot of the blame on Jodi Hildebrand. Ruby did have family members in attendance today. She had her brother Beau, her sister Julie, and her parents were also there. It appears they have returned home. They did appear to arrive together, and when Ruby entered the courtroom, she did turn and look at them and smiled. If you haven't seen the courtroom footage yet, it is in my previous post. I'm going to now read to you exactly what Ruby has admitted to, the things that she has done to her 2 youngest children, her 10-year-old daughter and her 12-year-old son. She's admitted to 4 counts out of the 6 of child abuse, and it appears to have started May 22nd, 2023. I am going to read some of this just to make sure that I get all the facts straight, so bear with me. One of the first things I noticed in this document was that it does appear that Ruby Franke is taking responsibility for doing some of this to her children. It's worded like this: Ruby intentionally or knowingly inflicted and allowed another adult to inflict serious physical injuries upon her 9 and 11-year-old children. So it does say that she inflicted this as well. The first count of child abuse has to do with physical torture of her 12-year-old son. It says that initially she was forcing him to do physical labor for hours and days at a time. And the examples listed were doing wall sits, which is when you put your back up against a wall and squat down. It's absolute torture for anyone that has tried to do this. The other is carrying boxes of heavy books up and down stairs repeatedly. And the third example was the fact that he was being forced to work outside and do labor outside in the crazy Utah heat. As you know, in Utah, temperatures can get up to over 100 degrees. This is one of the things that Jodi Hildebrand's neighbor had actually told the police about, was that she would look outside and she would see the children outside in crazy hot temperatures doing gardening. It also listed that he was made to do all of this barefoot and that he was also forced to stand outside in direct sunlight for hours and even days at a time. He was also forced to stay outside at all hours of the day and night for extended periods of time. This, of course, resulted in, as you can imagine, extremely serious sunburns. It resulted in blisters and repeated sloughing of the skin. So his skin was literally peeling off. He was denied food and water while he was doing this, and he would actually be punished if he was caught drinking water while he was outside. It went on to say that if they did feed him, he was given extremely bland, boring foods like a piece of chicken and some rice, while the rest of the family had a normal meal. He was being isolated from everyone in his life, and he was also refused any form of entertainment, which of course included electronics, but it also included books and any kind of paper. It also says that he apparently tried to run away previously. It was in July, and it looks like once they got him back, that is when they started restraining him. They initially tied up his wrists and his ankles, and they would tie him to weights or to Ruby as well. They also would get him to lay on his belly, and they would put his hands behind his back, handcuff his wrists, handcuff his ankles, and then tie the handcuffs together. This apparently caused excessive damage to his tissue and his muscles. And once he had open wounds, they would put some sort of homeopathic remedy on it, put duct tape over the wounds, and then put the handcuffs over the duct tape. The document also listed 3 specific incidences that Ruby Franke has admitted to. Number 1 was that she was kicking him while wearing boots. Number 2, she said she held his head underwater. And number 3, she said she would cut off his oxygen with her hand over his mouth and nose. Count number 2 is for the severe emotional harm she caused to her son. It stated that Ruby and Jodi sought to indoctrinate him. They were trying to convince him that he was evil and possessed. It went on to say that he had to be willing to be obedient to avoid punishments, that his punishments were necessary for him to repent, and that they were doing all of this out of love. The next 2 counts are for what she has done to her 10-year-old daughter. The first count is for severe emotional harm, and it does look like she endured exactly what her brother had endured, other than apparently the binding and also the 3 specific incidences that I had mentioned. She had been isolated the same way. She had been forced to do physical tasks and remain outside for extended periods of time. She was also denied food and water and told that she was evil and possessed. And the final count, count 4, was that these actions caused 2 or more physical injuries to her daughter. It says that she was forced to work outside in heat, barefoot as well. And she was also forced to run on dirt roads, apparently barefoot. So she had extensive injuries to her feet repeatedly. They said that when they found her, she was extremely sunburnt. She had blisters and her skin was peeling off as well. Ruby Franke is going to be sentenced on February 20th. We don't know right now what that is going to look like, but I will definitely be updating on this case, so make sure to hit follow.